people ask me, like, when do you think the demons came in? And looking back, I'm like, I have no idea. I'm 30 and I'm scared to stay at home now. I go to my friend's apartment. I stay on his couch. And then while I'm on his couch, I see the shadow thing again kind of go past the wall. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, it's following me. I haven't told anyone this, only the monk. In Buddhism, sometimes spirits can't move on to be reborn because they don't have enough merit. So I said, hey, well, what can I do then to be free? And he said,
I can imagine people just being like, is this stuff real?
as Christians, we know God inhabits our worship. So what if we're worshiping other things? You're actually opening yourself up to the demonic. I woke up the next morning and I said, I can't do this anymore. I was praying during this time to both Buddha and Jesus. I said, which one of you is real?
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.
Today, we have an incredible story. I, raised in a devout Buddhist household, experienced years of supernatural occurrences, depression, OCD, and all this from a young age. And when I say I don't mean I mean the guest we have here. His name is but it's IDE. Let's talk about that a little bit. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lecrae.
Yeah. So is that your name? Like what?
Yeah, so my parents are from Thailand.
Okay.
And I was born in the States. But if you have any Thai friends, you'll know that most of the Thai names are really long. And so there's always like a nickname that kind of that goes with it. So my first name's Apisit, last name Varia, but I go by like I.
Oh.
And so growing up, that was just my name around the house.
And I guess it's not a proper pronoun in like Thailand or so. It's like I did it. Who did that? I did it. So yeah, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about your early childhood. Like, what did being raised in a Buddhist household even look like? Because a lot of people don't have a context for that.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, growing up in a Thai household here in the States, my parents raised me up in the Buddhist temple, and so like many of the church kids will grow up in the youth group. I grew up in the kind of like the Buddhist youth group. And so we would go on Sundays, go in the summer, where we would learn Thai language, but we'd also learn about Buddhism in the midst of that. And I remember at a young age, my parents kind of talking to me and emphasizing the fact that, hey, you're Thai American, but if you're Thai, you're gonna have to be Buddhist. You have to stay Buddhist. And I remember that from a young age, like, this is just my identity. This is who I am. And so that was just the reality growing up. Just day to day, yeah.
I guess, a lot of people in America, we understand like growing up in a Christian household. What would it look like to grow up in a Buddhist household? Is there any distinct differences that you can think of?
Yeah, I would say at a surface level, it was just emphasizing just being a good person.
Okay.
Treating other people nicely and doing good works so that you'll have more blessing. It's like merit making. Okay. In the Buddhist context.
Yeah.
And so that was general rule, right? Just do good things, don't do bad things.
Yeah.
It's something within your control, your abilities to do. And so, and on top of that, there was and it's interesting too. So before any long trip or anything that's happening, we would be told to pray to Buddha, and to bow down to the statue, 3 times, and it wasn't until later where I kind of started getting curious about that, because in the Buddhist teaching, it doesn't teach you to pray to him. But I didn't make that connection until later. But just in terms of growing up, that's kind of the reality. Just asking for blessings, asking for protection from the Buddha by praying to the statue.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your story is interesting because as a young child, you started having some kind of supernatural encounters and experiences.
Yes.
Like talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was probably about when I was 12, maybe 13. I have a younger brother as well, 2 years younger than me. And in our house, we started experiencing things that were supernatural. And so doors closing by themselves, hearing voices, just strange occurrences around the house, to the point where I was actually scared. And so I would talk to my parents about it and mention it to them. But at that age, it's kind of, maybe you watched too many scary movies or you ate something bad, but it's my brother would experience the same thing. And so we would actually comfort one another. And so we would know when these things happen, we'll come talk to each other and comfort each other.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the reality growing up in that early teenage years, I would say.
Now, does this kind of reinforce your beliefs, like your Buddhist faith, or does it make you more curious? Like, what does this do?
For sure. So for me, because of these supernatural experiences, I knew that there was a world out there that we couldn't see. There's a supernatural world, and I was well aware of it. Now, being that I was Buddhist, by default, I would search for answers in Buddhism. So that drew me towards Buddhism even more. So being more earnest with my prayer life, meditation, talking to the monks at the temple. And in Thai culture, it's an expectation that you'll become a monk at least once in your life as a boy. And so I actually did that twice, once in my, I think, early teens, and then once after college. I became a monk with the orange robe, a shaved head.
Wow.
And, for about a month each time. And so I was genuinely curious, genuinely hungry to know about the spirituality aspect. And that's kind of where I made the connection, where the Buddha doesn't teach these things about pray to him and there's not even really a belief in God. It's more like the world is suffering, and there's suffering in the world. And so he's given us principles to kind of navigate that suffering in the hopes that as Christians, we believe in in heaven, or the new heavens and new earth, being with God.
Yeah.
For the Buddhists, it'd be more like escaping the cycle of birth and rebirth, because they believe in the reincarnation. And so there's a cycle, but in that cycle is suffering, because creation is suffering.
Yeah.
And so nirvana is actually escaping that suffering. So there's no, I would say there's no deity where you would pray to, and he doesn't teach that.
Yeah.
In fact, he's if anything, it's teaching you not to be attached to any spiritual deity or anything like that. It's just more like under your control.
Wow.
I would say. Yeah.
So is that's very interesting. If there's no attachment to a deity, were you wrestling with, well, what are these supernatural experiences, or what is happening? Like, I guess in Buddhism, what would that be looked at? Like, how would that be perceived, the supernatural realm?
I would say it's, in a way, this is just, and I'm not an expert in Buddhism.
Sure. For you,
from my understanding, it's almost like an agnostic perspective, where there may be spirits out there. We are not going to focus on them.
Okay.
We're just going to focus on navigating this life.
Got you.
Now, at the same time, and I learned the term later, it's something called folk Buddhism.
Okay.
FOLK, folk Buddhism.
Yeah.
And it's what you see practiced. And so if you were to go to Thailand, Cambodia, Southeast Asian countries, you'll see a lot of shrines. You'll see a lot of offering of incense to the Buddha statue, offering food to the Buddha statues. And so when I took a step back, when I was looking into all this, I was like, what is happening? Like what's going on? And I didn't make the connection till later, but the reality is people are aware of the spiritual realm too, right? And so what Buddhism does, oftentimes, it merges and mixes in with the local religions that were already there. So animism, like believing in spirits in the trees and the rocks, spirits of the land. And so I'm imagining from the Buddhist perspective, the Thai person's perspective, for example, that they're aware of the spiritual realm and they've had supernatural experiences. The Buddha doesn't provide answers to that, so they kind of merged it, kind of mixed it together.
Yep.
There's like Brahmanism, animism, and Buddhism kind of mixed in when you actually see how it's practiced.
Yeah.
So if you go to any house or restaurant in Thailand, you'll see a little shrine, and then you'll see incense there or food there. So it's almost an appeasement to the spirits.
Yep.
If I offer you these things, then you'll leave me alone.
Okay.
And there's an exchange. It's almost like hey, don't bother me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to offend you. And so there's this appeasement. There's no overcoming of it, but it's an appeasement.
Yeah.
And then you'll see that's the type of Buddhism that's very mostly practiced, I would say.
Yo, so a lot of y'all have seen me wearing some of the clothes on the pod, and you've been like, where can I get that shirt? Where can I get this? Where can I get that? A lot of it is my own merchandise that you can get at Lecrae.store. Like this shirt right here with God's child on the back, and the cog right here. The cog represents us being in the process of reconstruction, because God is always reconstructing us, right? But you can get all of this and more at Lecrae.store, Lecrae.store. Go there right now, get your discounts, get your merch, go get it. That's interesting because it's funny you say it that way. I think that probably a lot of religious beliefs kind of do that. Like even in Christianity, we'll tend to grab some superstition. We'll tend to grab like little components of different things. Yes, we love Jesus, but also don't walk under that ladder, you know? And it's like, what is that? Does those go together? But I can see that. So from your, I guess, upbringing, was your Buddhist faith, was it more of a cultural faith, or was it like, no, this is like dogmatically how we live every day? So
it was a journey, I would say.
Okay.
So starting off, it was cultural. Mm-hmm. When I had my supernatural experiences, I was like, okay, this has got to be real, because that's just my default Buddhism.
Yeah.
So let me learn more. Let me get stronger.
Okay.
in my faith in that, exercising my mind through like meditation and strengthening it, trying to navigate and whatever this is.
Yeah.
Right? And the suffering that I am experiencing in the world. So, trying to do that. So I would say I wanted to believe it. I really wanted to believe it. And even later on, I would say, even as a Buddhist, I was convinced there was a God. So I was actually
interesting.
I was sincerely praying to the Buddha as if, he had like all powerful and could help me and wanted to help me. It's almost like I wanted to believe.
Yeah.
And I wasn't content with this idea of Buddha doesn't teach these things. Buddha isn't that person you want him to be. But I'm just looking back now at how I was imagining it.
Yeah.
And so despite what I was learning, I made him into what I needed him to be, which is someone who loved me, someone who was good and all powerful. And so you could see, taking a step back, what I really wanted was the living God, right?
Yeah.
But at that time I didn't know him, so that's what I made him to be.
Are you seeing like prayers answered, or are you feeling like are you getting frustrated? Like how are you navigating this?
I will say that those supernatural experiences that scared me didn't stop. So they kept coming. There were seasons where it was intense and other seasons where it was quiet.
Yeah.
But I was always aware of it. And so I didn't really see prayers answered. Maybe things would happen where I prayed before I went on this flight, nothing happened. So,
okay.
I would,
right.
And I would associate that.
Right. So you get a little older, from what I understand, and from college on, these spiritual experiences, they start to intensify.
Yeah.
And I just like to take us on a journey of what started happening there.
Sure. I'll start during my college years. So in my undergrad years, that's the first time I was exposed to Jesus, to the gospel, that I can recall anyway. I had a group of friends. We'd some of my friends were Buddhists, some were Christians, and so they wanted to share their faith with me, and so I would listen, but I would be kind of telling them why Buddhism is better, and we would have friendly debates, right? Okay. And so I was that guy where, I wouldn't budge in my faith, and I even told my friend I'll never become a Christian.
Wow.
And so that was at that time I would be invited to church services, and I would go just to be with my friends, but I would be like defiant. I'd have like a Buddhist necklace on the outside of my shirt just to let them know, hey, I'm Buddhist, don't mess with me. But I would say that was my exposure. And I remember there was one clear moment where I was with a friend and they were sharing me about who Jesus was and who he is. And the reason I listened to her was because I really felt like she was authentic. Like she really believed what she was saying, and I could tell. And because she's my friend, I know she cares about me. And this person really thinks that this Jesus loves me and cares for me, and she wants to share that. So I actually listened. I wasn't kind of putting up walls, but I was listening to what she had to say about, this God loves you, and it's the sin that separates us from him. There's no amount of good that can cancel out the bad, which is actually like the Buddhist kind of perspective where like it's a scales.
Yeah.
It's scale. And so if you do a little bit more good, then
it outweighs the
sin,
bad.
then you'll be okay and you'll be born in a better situation in the next life. But what she was saying was like, sin can't be paid for by your own works. And so that's why Jesus, because he loves you, he came and he died for you on the cross, right? He paid for it and then he rose again. And so I was like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Thank you. And then I went on to talk about Buddhism with her, but all that to say is it planted seeds in me at that age. Now, at that time also, I was going through, in addition to the spiritual things, I started having severe depression in college and I started having these, I didn't know what they were called at the time, but just these intrusive thoughts. Something bad's gonna happen to your parents, your parents are gonna die, and I didn't know what they were. And I just felt like, oh, am I going crazy? So I went to the school therapist, counselor, and then she wasn't able to kind of help me at that time. So she said, it seems like something you should go seek outside help for. So I went to see psychiatrists, therapists, psychologists, and they were prescribing medication, and they diagnosed me with like severe depression and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, because the thoughts would come, and I feel like I would have to do something to get rid of them. That anxiety would build up, that obsessive thought would build up, and I had to relieve it somehow. So I would have to do random things like, and looking back, I know it's spiritual, but it was like, go ahead and in the dorm, just start yelling out in the middle of the dorm, just start yelling random things, and then your parents won't be in trouble.
And you would do this,
yeah, because how do I say it? Although it didn't seem rational to me, I was like, if there's even a chance that my parents could be in trouble if I don't do this, I would give in because of the anxiety that would build up. And it was hard to ignore. So that if I ignored it, it would just be like anxious.
Yeah.
And then it'd be like the voice is like, are you scared? Are you scared? Like, are you scared to do it then? Don't you love your parents? And I didn't make the connection of what it was at the time, but I just felt like whatever this is, if there's a chance that this could be true, then I'm going to give in and do these crazy things.
And when you say the connection, you're thinking this is, now hindsight, you're like, oh, this is demonic.
Totally demonic.
So walk us through like were there other things that were happening?
Yeah. So again, the spiritual things didn't stop. I'd have, the nightmares, I'd have the sleep paralysis, so these things were going on. And it wasn't until, again, I was going through different therapists and different psychiatrists. At the highest point, I was at like 12 pills a day that they would have me on. And I felt like it was just numbing my brain, not actually resolving what's underneath. And I remember around, I think I was 25, when I actually went to a new counseling center. And on the first interview, they were just like, hey, just to let you know, we're a Christian clinic. And so we incorporate, our faith into our sessions. And I said, that's fine. I don't care. I just want help.
Help me. I've been there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so after every session, she would pray for me. She'd say, can I pray for you? And I said, yes. And we went through some books on OCD together, and she kind of helped me navigate, gave me some tools to kind of overcome these intrusive thoughts. And that was actually the last therapist I ever saw. So for me, I was like, oh, I think they're just really good at their job. Like I didn't make the connection at all with prayer and, the faith behind it. And so I actually felt like things were getting better. So it didn't stop, but I was able to function. I didn't have as much of that OCD symptoms for another about 5 years. And then it was when I was 30 when the supernatural things kind of just spiked again.
What happened this time?
I had gone back to grad school, and so I moved back home with my parents, and I was actually studying. And then while I was studying, I went upstairs to get a snack, and as I'm going back downstairs, I remember seeing like a shadow figure, like a person kind of walking by the light. And so I saw the shadow, I saw the head, the arms, the legs, and I thought maybe someone went in the room when I went to get a snack. So I went into the room, and there's no one there. I thought maybe it was a cat because I had a cat at the time. No one there, nothing there. And so I was like, okay, that's weird. And I've never actually seen anything like that before, where I've heard, I've actually felt, but I've never seen. So I was kind of like, okay, this is new. I'm a little freaked out, but I'm gonna go back to studying. But Sunday comes around, and I actually went to see the temple, the Buddhist temple, and I had, being a monk there twice, I had a mentor that would, was my kind of spiritual guide, and so I actually talked to him about what had happened that day, and I remember what he explained to me was, in Buddhism. Sometimes spirits can't move on to the next life, to be reborn, because they don't have enough merit. And so what you saw may be something like that, where the spirit's stuck. And so I trust him. So I said, hey, well, what can I do then to be free of this? And he said, well, you can share your merit with that spirit. And I said, okay, how do I do that? And he told me to, go back and meditate. And as you're meditating, just tell the spirit you're going to share your merit with the spirit. And so, sure, I'm going to do that because I trust you and I want to be free. So I go back to the room at my parents' house, and I'm meditating. And while I'm meditating, I feel like there's something in the room. Like it's getting a little colder. So I was like, okay, I think whatever's here. So I said, hey, I'm going to share my merit with you, so that you can move on. Yeah, you're already nodding your head because you know where this is going. So I started feeling cold inside my body now after I did that. And so I left, and I talked to my parents, hey, Mom, Dad, are you guys cold? Because I'm freezing, right? And they're like, no, we're fine. So I knew something was wrong at that point. And so I didn't tell them. I said, okay, and I left. But for the next 2 weeks, I'm always cold. I mean, I could be indoors. My friends would be in their T-shirts and shorts, but I would be in my jacket, like indoors, with a hat and gloves sometimes. And I would always feel this breeze on my face, like even though there's no windows open. And I'm like, okay, something is really wrong.
Whoa.
Things started happening in the house more. Like I just sensing things and hearing things, footsteps, running around. And so I'm 30 and I'm scared to stay at home now. So I actually leave. I go to my friend's apartment. He's by the college. So I stay on his couch. And then while I'm on his couch, I see the shadow thing again, kind of go past the wall. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, it's following me. And so I haven't told anyone this, only the monk. And so I told my friend, I gotta go. So I leave. And it's about 10:30 at night. And I actually knock on the door of the temple. And the monk lets me in and gives me a room. And so I stay with him. And in the morning, he does some Buddhist prayer rituals with me, like offerings to the spirit, like sprinkling me with holy water. And he says, if it doesn't stop, you can come back later. And so it didn't stop. So I come back to him and we talk. And then he just kind of, in a way, just says like he doesn't know what's wrong with me. He's just saying like some people have a weaker mind. And so they're more open to these things. And to hear that, I'm like, and I'm in trouble.
Yeah, where's my hope?
Where's my hope?
Yeah.
I remember that being a big thing for me, because when I was in Buddhism, I was wondering like, where is my hope? It's okay. Life is suffering. I got it. And then I'm gonna hopefully find a good job, get married, have kids, and I die. And then maybe I'll go through this again, like until, the only way they say is to like actually become a monk, and to be a good monk at that, like talking about like just not being attached to anything. That's the thing. They say suffering comes from attachment. So you can't be attached to anything. That means you can't really love anything. And so that's the only way to be free of all this. And so I'm thinking like, where's my hope? Like, where's the hope in Buddhism I guess is my question. Anyways, I was still wrestling with my faith, but fast forward to here. So I got that answer from the monk. I go back, I still have class at this time. So I'm trying to study and do my work.
You have a lot going on.
A very stressful time. And I remember going to my car. It was about 10 at night after class and thinking, I don't know what to do. Like I'm hopeless, And so I get in the car, I turn on the car, and the radio comes on, and on the radio is a pastor, and he's preaching a sermon, and I'm confused, because I'm like, I'm not listening to Christian stations.
Yeah.
It's more like hip hop, top 40, music. And I'm like, why is this pastor on my radio? But I'm like, okay, if this is God trying to talk to me, I'm going to listen. I'm desperate. I'm really desperate. And so in the message he's preaching, he's saying, do you feel like you're in the middle of the ocean and waves are hitting you from every direction? Have you ever felt that? And I said, I'm like, yes, I'm feeling like that right now. And then he asked, do you ever wonder why God would put you in that situation? And I was like, sure. And then he says, sometimes he allows those waves to push you closer to him. And so the message I got was, if I'm going through all this craziness so that I can meet this God, then I'm going to give him a chance. And so if you recall, I had been invited to church like 10 years before. So I kind of knew where my friends were going. Sunday comes around, I just pop in. I didn't tell them I'm coming. I'm not here to see them.
Wow.
I'm just giving God this chance. Like, if you want to speak to me and you're the Christian God, then I'm going to go. So I sit in the back of the sanctuary. They worship in the beginning, and I'm bawling, like tears. And I'm trying to hide my face because I don't want anyone to see me like this. And I don't know why I'm crying, but I felt like I was bottling this in for 2 weeks. And so the pastor gets up, and then he starts talking about demons. And then he's like, this is what it might feel like, or you might experience if you're being oppressed by demons. Talking about the wind, the swirl, and he's talking about the cold. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Because I'm like, this is exactly what I'm going through.
Wow. So he's literally speaking to your experience.
Yes. Yeah. He gives his message, and afterwards they worship again, and I'm bawling again. And so my friends see me this time. They actually notice I'm here, and so they come sit with me, and they see that I'm crying and tearing, and they're like, what's wrong? And I said, I can't tell you, because no one knows except the monk. My parents don't know. Only the monk knows really what's going on. And so they said, fine, if you don't have to tell us, but would you be interested in getting prayer? And I said, sure. So I come up to the front of the sanctuary after service, and there's the pastors there, and they ask me what's going on, and I tell them a little bit, not the full story, but they know, right? They can sense what's going on, and they said, hey, like, we could pray for you, and you may feel better after the prayer, but the only way to be really free is if you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior and put your trust in him. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm Buddhist. I can't. And so they said, okay, we'll just bless you then. So they just pray a blessing over me, and I feel better, So I actually leave the church feeling a little more hopeful. I decided to actually go back to my parents' house and stay there. And so I go home, and that night was probably the most intense night in terms of like activity, just sleeping in my jacket and my hat, just feeling like there's things in the room with me. And it was rough. And I woke up the next morning and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Something has to change. And if Jesus, you're real, I'm gonna ask you for help, right? With my parents, because my parents were number one, like, in terms of like who I love and who I honor. And so I said, if you want me to follow you, Jesus, then help me with my parents. It's just a prayer.
What was going on in terms of you saying help me? Is it like to navigate their faith with yours, or what was the thought process there?
I felt like I had to ask for their permission to leave Buddhism.
Yeah.
Especially from a young age, they told me you have to be Buddhist.
Which is not, I think, not to interrupt you, but like for a lot of people, especially like in the Eastern world, you look in the scriptures and whole households were coming to faith. It was kind of like a shame and honor thing. It was like, I don't want to dishonor you, so can we all do this, or can I do this? And so I think for a lot of people, like, why would you need to ask your parents' permission? But just understanding the context.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right. And so I felt I wanted to honor them. I wanted to get their permission.
Yeah.
Without offending them or anything like that. But I was like, man, I know how they are. Like they're just. It's almost an identity thing. So,
Yep.
Right. To be Thai is to be Buddhist. So what do you mean? And so. And I was praying during this time to both Buddha and Jesus, and I said, I was really like, which one of you is real? Pretty much, right?
Rolling the dice. Somebody.
the next morning comes around and I catch them before they go to work. And I say, hey, can I talk to you guys? And they said, sure. And they although they don't know what's going on exactly, they know that I'm stressed. They know that I'm burdened. And so I said, hey, I'm going through a lot right now. And I really need help. And I feel like I found something that could help me. Sure, what is it? And I said, it's religion. And they said, which one? And I said, Christianity. And they said, sure, if you think it's going to help you, then go ahead. Very, very easy. And I was almost thrown back. So they go to work and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was so easy, right? Like I thought it would be like a conversation or intense, and, why and all that stuff. And it was just like, if you think it's going to help you, go. And I was like, all right. And so I go to the pastor at that church who was preaching. I go to his house. We had set up an appointment. So I go, I'm in his kitchen, and again, he's telling me about Jesus, the gospel. And he just, very lovingly just invites me, do you want to follow him? Like, do you want him in your life? And I said, yes, like I do. And so, he led me through the sinner's prayer, and he just pray after me. And so I prayed after him, and, we talked a little bit, and then I left the house, and I still have to go to class. And so I'm driving to school, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a Christian now. Like, what does that mean? I don't know, but I guess I'm a Christian now. And so I'm actually studying before class. I'm in the library, studying by myself. And then I start feeling electricity kind of going through my feet. And I'm like, what is this now? This is new. So I tried to get to stop. Are my feet falling asleep or what is going on, right? So it wouldn't stop. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I guess I'm getting possessed now, right? Because I felt like something was going to happen. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm in trouble. And so I just gave up. I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like, whatever happens, happens, right? And so the electricity feeling started going out my legs slowly, like throughout the day. But everywhere it passed, below it was warm now. Like, I actually felt warm in my feet. As it was going up, I felt warm in my legs. And then I'm in a class. It was about 9 p.m. And then the tingling feelings at the top of my head. But I feel warm below. And I'm like, wow, like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel good because I've been cold the last 2 weeks. And the moment it hits the top of my head, the lights in the lecture hall turn off and on 3 times, like on, off, on, off, on, off. And the professor stops teaching, and he's like, wow, there's like a ghost in here. And everyone's laughing. But I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I think it's because of me, right?
Whoa.
I leave the class. Again, I'm walking back to my car, and I'm like, wow, I don't know what's happening right now, but I feel good. Like, I'm gonna go visit my friend who I was staying on his couch. I call him. I say, hey, can I come over? And he says, it's not a good time. The power's out of my place. And so I was like, that's weird. Okay. But then I hear a voice in my head, and it says, if you go to his place, the power will come back on. And I was like,
all right.
And it's been a weird enough day, right? I just accepted Jesus, and all this is happening. And so I say, I'm just gonna go. So I say, I'll come over anyway. So I drive out. The stoplights are off because of the power being out. And so I pull into his apartment complex. And as I pull in, all the lights come on, like, to the apartment complex. And I go into his place, and I say, hey, what happened? And he says, oh, the power went out about 3 different times, and it came on when you got here. So I'm trying to process what's happening right now. So I talked to my pastor later, and I told him the story. And he says, oh, when you accept Jesus, you get the Holy Spirit, right? And that's what you felt coming in to your body. And that's why you felt the warmth. And I'm like, okay. Like, I was like, all right, sure.
Yeah.
And I remember the morning, it was almost as if I was wearing sunglasses my whole life. And that morning, it's like the sunglasses were off. And I was like, this is the most beautiful morning I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the sun just was different, and the birds were chirping, the clouds looked like amazing. And I was like, what is happening? I was like, this is crazy. And I was in my car, and I remember it hit me. Jesus is real. Like, this Jesus that my friends told me about 10 years ago is real. And he's with me right now. He sees me. And I almost had that feeling of hyperventilating, like, oh my goodness. It just all came in like a flood. And I was tearing in my car, just tears of like joy and amazement. And it was from that moment on where, like, I was like, I have to get to know who this Jesus is. And so since then, I've been on this journey of getting to know him, because I was like, I'm 30. I feel like I wasted so much time. I got to get to know him. And that's the beginning of my journey with
Goodness
the Lord,
gracious. God is so kind, man.
Yeah.
Like when I listen to your story, I'm like, to give us, because I similarly, when I became a Christian, I had these experiences, right? And the same kind of like, oh, the lights came on, like the joy of the Lord is upon me. I remember giving all my jewelry away to like people on the street, just like, you, whatever you want. God is so good. But my wife, she grew up in church. So for her, it was like this gradual progression. It wasn't like the lights came on. It was like one day she was really just a lot more serious about her faith than she used to be. And I'm just like, man, thank you, God, for being so kind to me and giving me that unique experience. And I love hearing what you went through, because you literally went from dark to light, like being oppressed by demonic forces to now being a light, literally turning on the lights in people's world.
Yeah, I feel like the Lord has, the right journey for different people, right? And so I know myself, and I was stubborn. And
Hold on real quick. Wait a minute. I need you to know this. We're in season 2 of The Deep End. And season 2 is about stories, specifically stories from people that you want to hear from, stories that you want to hear. Tell us what stories you want to hear. Tell us the people whose stories you want to hear. Because I'm a firm believer that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, our stories. So we want to tell those stories here on The Deep End. Let me know who you want to hear from and what you want to hear about. All right? Blessings.
I was just adamant on like, I'll never become a Christian. And, and for me, I'm just like, man, like whatever it took, thank you, Lord. And I remember asking, when it hit me, I was like, Lord, why didn't you save me when I was 18 or a teenager? Like, why did I have to go through all that like suffering and pain? And I felt like the Lord said, I can use all that. And I was like, oh, like, okay, Lord. And so, and looking back, even now, it's on March 2nd, it'll be 15 years since that. And I look back and I'm like, wow, like, because I've been to therapy and taken medication for these things. I've been severely depressed. I've been oppressed by the demonic. When I meet someone who's going through something similar, I can relate. Like, it's not like you're weird. It's like, I've been there. And I can testify and say, Jesus, he did this for me. He can do it for you.
Yeah.
And so I feel like what he said is perfectly right. It's like the things that we've been through, he can use it for his glory and to help others.
That's good.
And to give them hope. And so, yeah, I mean.
I'm curious, I do want to know like some of the ways in which you've seen God use it, but I'm also curious, you are torn between Buddhism and Jesus. You've been spiritually oppressed. There's depression, there's OCD, and then you have this supernatural experience where you meet the living God. I find that a lot of Americans would be skeptical about some of the stuff you said, right? Like, you were cold, you saw a shadow, there was electricity. From your perspective, why do you think, like, I don't know, do you notice people like in America a little more skeptical of stuff like that? Like, I feel like.
So my experience is that, I mean, one, more people have experienced things than we know that they're open about, that they'll talk about freely. And so from my experience, I haven't got a lot of skepticism, but at the same time, it's almost like I've gotten I don't know what to do with what you just said.
Okay.
Because it's my story. And so they could be skeptical. They could say I'm lying. But more often than not, people have had their own
journeys, experiences.
Whether they're believers or not, they've experienced things that they can't explain.
Yeah,
and,
that's good.
And if you go anywhere outside the West, a lot of people have had these kind of experiences. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are dealing with depression and even OCD. So there's a relatability there.
Yeah.
at the same time, there's people who are like, oh, that's good for you. Like, I'm glad you're in a better place, because they don't know, it's almost like they don't know how to
process
what I shared.
Yeah.
But I think that's the powerful thing about testimony is like, it's your story.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the worst they could say is you're lying, but
Right.
I know where I was, and people who know me know the change that they've seen in my life.
Exactly.
And so,
yeah, I always find that interesting because, it's a supernatural experience, but I'm sure you still have friends who are Buddhist and family members and so on and so forth. What do they make of this new version of you? Like, do they have a category for it?
yeah, I'd say it ranges. I think a lot of my friends who are not Christians yet, they'll look at it like, oh, I'm happy for right? I'm happy for him that he's in a better place. Even with my parents, it's been a journey, because I will say that, they were very open to me becoming a Christian. But like you, it was about 2 weeks later, I had like the Buddhist, it's like a bracelet. I had the Buddhist necklaces. I had Buddhist like pictures and stuff that I had in my room. And so I felt like I can't keep these, and I don't want to dishonor them by just trashing them, because they'll see it, right?
Yeah.
What happened to all that stuff in that? So I packed it together and I said, Mom, Dad, I want to give this to you because I'm following Jesus now, and I'm a new believer, so I don't know all the but I just felt like I can't, and so I gave it to them, and then I think that's when it hit them, because they were saying like, oh, you're serious, like, it wasn't just a phase. I thought it was temporary, and I say no, it's serious, because I know he's real, and I have to be devoted to him. And so being a Thai oldest son, I had certain responsibilities. So I remember even being questioned, saying like, hey, when we die, who's going to do the Buddhist rituals for us then, if you're not? And I said, I don't know, like, Mom, Dad, I don't know. Like, all I know is that I have to follow Jesus, and I love you guys. And even like, are you not Thai then? I'm like, no, like, I'm Thai. I'm just following Jesus.
Wow.
So there's identity, right? And so there was a little bit of, I wouldn't say like a lot of hostility after that, but even after that, it was kind of like, who is God? Like, like, what is God?
Wow.
I tried to even give like a Thai Bible, and they just like didn't want it. But I would say since then, their hearts are softened, right? They're still not believers yet. I'm still praying for them.
Yeah.
But they'll allow me to pray over meals. Like, if they're sick or something's going on, pray for me. They'll actually say like, pray. And then I remember even people asking them, have you seen a difference in I since he became a Christian? And they'll say, yeah, he's happier. Like, he seems like he's in a better place. So they see this happening, and their hearts are softening. Yeah. So yeah.
I lived that. Same thing. My mom thought I joined the cult when I became a Christian. She's just like, what is happening right now? You're memorizing the verses and just, what is going on? So I totally understand that process. And it was like, same with my mom, like, her heart had to be softened, and just like, I learned to like quit preaching at her and like just like wash the dishes and like be nice.
I was very zealous. Like, I was very like just ramming it down people's throats, and I've adjusted, I'll be loving, I'll be prayerful. I still will, when opportunities present itself, I'll share the gospel with them. And but yeah.
Now, how have you seen God use your crazy journey?
Just being a friend to people, being a resource. And so people around me, if they'll know like, okay, if they have going through something, that they can talk to me. And so I'll be there for them. And even people who are not believers yet will reach out and they'll say, hey, this is what's happening. And what I can do is I can point them to Jesus. Yeah. And I can tell my story of what Jesus did for me. I've shared my testimony online. And so also in that area, people will email me I'm going through the same thing. And, sometimes I'll just email them back and encourage them. Other times we'll talk on the phone or something like that. And I'll just kind of, point people to Christ.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it's just.
Do you feel like, because I think the generation, the younger generation now is very open to spirituality. Yeah. They're not as dogmatic, like, I don't mess with it, but they are open to all kinds of spirituality.
Right.
I personally feel like your story helps shed some light on some things. But I'm just curious from your experience, like, do you feel like that's been a part of the journey?
Yeah. So I didn't make the connection right away because people ask me, like, when do you think the demons came in? And looking back, I'm like, I have no idea, because when I'm growing up, I'm bowing to different statues, even like Hindu statues, like, because it's almost like it's all good. Like, I'm gonna get blessing from everywhere I can. So, but actually, there's this book right here. It's called and I brought it because of that. It's called Change the Map.
Okay.
And it's a book talking about how to pray for people who are in Buddhism and how to witness to them. And what this made it clear for me, because there's a chapter about worship. There's a section about worship, and it says, like, as Christians, we believe, like, God inhabits our worship. Right? So, what if we're worshiping other things, though, right? And so, taking a step back, and if you believe that there's God and his angels, and then there's everything else, which is, in our world, it's demonic. Yeah. Right? It's evil. And so when we're worshiping anything else, whether it be like a wooden statue of a Buddha, sometimes the demons will inhabit that worship, that praise. Right. And so, when we worship something, we naturally open up to whatever it is we're worshiping. It's a posture of openness. Yeah. Right? So when we open ourselves up to things that are not God, we give a doorway to the enemy, to the demons. And so that's the danger of worshiping, thinking everything's all good, because everything can't be true. And if they're all saying different things, right? They can't all be true. I mean, even as a Buddhist, I was thinking that, like, there's so many ways to God, and Buddha's my way because I'm Asian, right? So that's my way, and for you in the West, it could be Jesus. But in reality, if you actually look at the different faiths, they're incompatible with what they're saying. We can try to, like, mix it up and say it's all good, but in reality, it's not true. If God is real, then he's going to want us to know who he is. Yeah. Right. And so, the Bible tells us this is the living God. This is the only true God. Yep. And so as a Buddhist, or if you're worshiping other things, other spirits, you're actually opening yourself up to the demonic. Yeah. Right? And, even in Thailand, there's things like, I guess you would call them witch doctors, or, like, people with powers. But if you're opening yourself up to those things, it's always a snare to get you to go deeper into to that area. So you may get a little bit of relief or a little bit of blessing, but you've also got sucked into even worse situations. So it's a trap. Yeah. Right? The only way to be really free is to trust in Jesus. Yeah. Right? And so, I mean, I don't know when it came in, but
that's the hard part, man. Because I think about that often, is like, you're trying to tread lightly on people's sense of identity, but at the same time, you're like, but you could be worshiping a demon. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, I'm not trying to make you out to be like an idiot or just trash everything you believe. Right. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, Michael Heiser, the unseen realm, there's a world out there, and we're just dabbling in it. And if it's not the God of all creation, and who is it?
Right. Right. Yeah, because I mean, you can find, like, let's say for Buddhism, you can find good aspects of it, right? So even as a Buddhist, I was thinking I could, for a Buddhist person, at least the way I was thinking about it, you could be a Christian and a Buddhist, because it's all good, right? So even sometimes when Buddhists give their life to Jesus, or they say they're going to give their life to Jesus, you'll go to their house and you'll see, like, there's still the Buddha there, there's, like, the Hindu God, and there's a picture of Jesus, because it's all good. But I think it could be dangerous.
Absolutely.
Right? And I mean, it's not, how do I say it? There's there's some good things that could be taught in the religion, but good would lead to a dead end.
Yeah.
Well, you're still stuck in the darkness. There's only one way really to be free. So it's not good enough. You know what I mean?
Right. That's right. Yeah, I relate, man. I love your story. My mom, she was a casual practitioner of Buddhism for a season. So we had a Buddhist statue in the house, and
I didn't know that.
And she was like a hippie, you know, just like, oh, this is, you know, just the earth and let's do good. And maybe, you know, so she was open. But as a kid, you know, I was raised to be a free thinker. And so I was a skeptic when I walked into Christianity. But I love hearing people's journey coming from like not being raised in a Christian house, because I can relate to that. Like that was not something I was trying to choose. That's why I know God is real. And I had supernatural experiences too. It's like, I don't know if you guys are going to believe this, but this is what happened to me, you know? So I really love that, man. I can imagine people just being like, is this stuff real? Is God real? Is all, you know, but I would just hope, like, we're not sitting here being dogmatic and like, as an intellectual person, I would never make this stuff up. It doesn't benefit me to make this stuff up. Like, why tell a story of electricity in your feet to the top? It's no benefit other than making you look crazy to people who don't understand this. It's that it's real. And I love that.
Amen.
I love that. Okay. When you were practicing Buddhism, I guess the different deities, did you ever feel closer to any was there ever a dynamic like that?
No, so how do I say? It was always the Buddha.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, there's the gold statues, the wooden statues, like, you know, different images of the Buddha.
Yeah.
But I always felt like it was going to the Buddha. So there's that. And, you know, while I was in Thailand or visiting other countries, there would be some shrine or something to like maybe a Hindu god or something like that, which I would still bow down to and ask blessing from. But it was always the Buddha. It was like the one I would be praying to.
And that's an offline conversation, but I'm just like, in my brain, I'm like, what's behind all that? But anyway, okay. A lot of people are going to struggle with the idea in the West. And we just talked about this, like, you know, Christianity erases their ethnicity, it erases their background, and their culture. And you talked about that being a struggle for your parents. Like, was that a struggle for you ever? Like, man, am I really Thai? Or were you just struggling so much that you were like, forget it, I need Jesus, I don't care about my ethnicity and my background?
Yeah, I mean, when I gave my life to Jesus, it already was sunk in that this God created everybody, right? Like we are all created by God. And from what I heard, God loves us, right? And so God loves each and every person, whatever country you're from, whatever ethnicity you are, that he loves us. And I already had an understanding that he wants us all. So I never thought that, hey, I'm giving up my Thai identity.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking like, oh my goodness, the Thai people need to know Jesus. Because before I became a Christian, I was already working in nonprofits and trying to strengthen the Thai community and doing things that help the community. Yeah. And Thai Americans back in Thailand, my heart was for the Thai people. Yeah. To be in just a better situation. And so, and now when I realized that Jesus is real, I'm like, there's nothing that the Thai people need more than to know Jesus. So I never thought like, I'm giving up my identity, but I'm like, oh, like I'm as a Thai American, I'm free in Jesus. And my fellow people and my fellow Thai people need to know Jesus. And so that's what I've been praying for. That's what I've been seeking to do, is share the good news of Jesus with them.
That's amazing. One more question.
All right.
This is great. You talked about accepting Jesus felt like taking off the sunglasses. And if someone you're navigating or you're talking to is blind, how do you encounter them now? Like if you were dealing with the version of you that was like, I'm Buddhist and I got my necklace on, and how do you deal with that person today?
Yeah, I would say, knowing how I was, and it's something that I'm still learning and growing in. But I would say what I've been doing and what I've learned so far is, one, just to begin in prayer, right? Because one thing I will say, and I didn't, there's a story. So after I was saved, I was looking through one of my drawers, and it was a graduation card from when I graduated undergrad, and I had kept it. So I opened it up, and I'm like, what is this? So I look at it and I read it. You know, it's a long written notes to me. Congratulations. But, since the day I met you, I've been praying for your salvation every night. And I pray that one day you'll get to know Jesus too. So I'm like, oh my goodness. And I don't keep in touch with this friend. I hadn't kept in touch with her. And I found her on Facebook, and I just messaged her and saying, hey, I just want to let you know, I found your card from back in the day. And I'm a follower of Jesus now. I love Jesus. And thank you so much for your prayers. So I just sent her that message. And so I see the fruit of prayer. Right? If people's hearts are not open or they're not there yet, I mean, the number one thing we can always do is pray. And so one, it's like for my loved one, people who I want to know to come to know Jesus, I'll pray for them, that the Holy Spirit will touch their hearts. And it took, from the time I heard the gospel, it took me 10 years. So
that's
I'm
true.
Slow learner, whatever you want to call it, right? But, so praying for them. And like you said, just loving on them, right?
Yeah.
Just being a friend, let's hang out, let's grab a meal, let's talk. And they know that I'm a Christian. It's not a secret that I'm a follower of Jesus. And so I know people are observing too. They're like, okay, this Christian, what's he like? What's he doing with his life? And how's he processing things? And so they're watching. Coworkers are watching. And so just letting my life be an example. And then I'll also look and be always like open to those opportunities where I see like, okay, there's an opportunity that the Lord, I think, has given me to share more about Jesus here, pointing them to Jesus, telling them the gospel. I'll kind of just gauge as the Holy Spirit leads, like maybe they're struggling with something, and I'm like, hey, like, can I pray for you? Even though I know you're not a Christian yet, but can I pray for you? And so finding these opportunities and taking them when they come. So that's kind of the way I've been navigating. I'm still learning. God's still teaching me.
That's pretty powerful, though. That encourages me. It's like, you know what? I'm such an action-oriented person. It's like, oh yeah, how about I trust God and pray for people? That's really good.
Yeah,
really
I think
powerful.
someone told me like, don't talk to people about God until you talk to God about those people.
Wow.
So I've been trying to remember that too.
That's really good.
Because then the hearts can be ready, right? So
I'm eternally grateful for your story, man. And man, I just pray that God would continue to use you in a million different ways just to reach people. And man, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm
Absolutely.
so blessed to be able to connect with you. And
Yeah,
I'm encouraged
absolutely.
by your story too.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.